My name is Brett and I'm from Elk Creek, Virginia.
My name is Andy Smith, or Andrea Smith, and I'm from North Carolina originally, but now live in Patrick County, Virginia.
My name is Jim Costa. I am from Hinton, West Virginia, which is down in the southeastern part of the state, not too far from southwestern Virginia. But I'm in West Virginia.
My name is Jim Lloyd, or Jim, or whoever. I'm from Rural Retreat, Virginia.
Where?
Rural Retreat. Natives say Rural Retreat.
We are Ralph and Rex McGee. Guess which one is which?
I'm Ralph McGee.
I am older by just a few, like a year and a few months. Rex.
My name's Carl Johnson and I'm from Shelbyville, Tennessee. Originally from Roanoke, Virginia.
My name is Tony Mabe. I'm from Walnut Cove, North Carolina.
And I'm Heather Berry Mabe. We are husband and wife, and I'm originally from Waynesboro, Virginia, and now make my home in Walnut Cove, North Carolina.
I was not forced to do it as a kid, which is kind of interesting considering my role now working with Junior Appalachian Musicians, where we provide kids with that opportunity. But no, my dad played music growing up. It was just what we did. I remember them telling me, of us wanting to be like other kids in the community and go on these vacations and things like that. And my parents would say, well, no, we're going to Bluegrass Festival here, or the Fiddlers Convention there, and that's your summer vacation, so you might as well learn to like it. And I guess that's what I did. So it was just the main part of our family culture and culture in the community. Despite the large role that music played in our family, we were never made to take it up. And I was about 13 or 14 before I ever got interested in actually learning how to play. And a lot of that was because I had a crush on some boy who was a musician. So it's interesting the different pathways that take you to it. I always knew that I loved the music, And I was always a dancer. I knew how to flat-foot dance from very young age.
When I joined the Greengrass Cloggers in '78, I hit the road. I quit college and hit the road with them in '79. So told mom and dad I was joining the circus and never went back for like another 10 years. But when we were on the Clogger bus, everybody was playing music all the time, and everybody were musicians. So I learned to play guitar and sing along, Carter family stuff, and then one night we were playing a square dance somewhere, and the guy in the band, in the group who had been our bass player, because we would do dances, we would play and then we would put them down and then we would get out and dance and things like that. He up and quit, and so Phil Jameson looked at me and said, "You got good rhythm. You're playing for the square dance tonight." And he put a bass in my hand and just basically showed me. He said, "We'll just play. We'll play in G and D all night." Just showed me what to do, and I just had a slap, real simple, and that's it was all downhill after that.
When you were a kid, did you have any sense of rich music at all?
I was a dancer. I was always a dancer.
Okay.
Tap was always like my favorite thing to do growing up, and I drove my parents crazy tap dancing all over the house. My mom and dad always listened to a lot of music, and they danced, to Ray Charles, and that was like the most popular thing that was in the house was Ray Charles and blues. They loved the blues, but there were no musicians in my family, not immediate family or even extended really. And so when I was in high school, I met a girlfriend who was also a tap dancer, who showed me how to flatfoot and clog. And so I started doing that, just whenever I could. When I went off to college and met the Greengrass Cloggers, little did I know that I hit the mother lode of cloggers, by going to East Carolina University. That's right. Because that's where they were based out of. So from there I just really just got into it. So I ended up quitting school.
Well, how did it happen? Did you just say, well, hey, I can clog?
Yeah, that's what it was. I mean, there was a place called the Tree House downtown Greenville, where they would have a lot of old time and bluegrass bands, and I really didn't understand the difference. I had mostly just knew about bluegrass, and so, but they would have good dance bands there, and every now and then a big group of cloggers would show up, and I would be like, what? Where are all these really good dancers from, you know? But regardless, whether they were in town or not, you know, I would just be dancing, you know, a couple nights a week, because it was no cover, it was free, you just, you know, so I'd drink water all night and just dance, you know, and I was different from my other college friends.
But I'm just picturing all of a sudden a bunch of these guys, green grass clouders, come in.
Yeah.
And they're all kicking butt.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's like everybody looked professional, and I'm like, but I still, because I was a tapper, I mean, I wasn't a great tapper, but I was a tap dancer. I knew how to do it. And I was looking around, I'm like, I could do that, you know, so I would bug them, and I would, show me that step, you know, and it was just like, I mean, for me, it's like the best way to learn any folk instrument or dance is just like doing it for hours and hours and hours with a bunch of people, and there's no pressure, and you can steal stuff, you know, and learn stuff without having to take a class. You know, it's all just caught, you know, just caught instead of taught. Once I got good enough on the bass to like play in really good jams, like the music was really it for me, you know, and I mean, just a couple of years into it, I was just like, oh wow, the music, you know, I would find myself hardly dancing at all in a fiddler's convention for 4 days. I would only be playing, you know, and especially once I started playing banjo, you know, once I got good enough to hang, you know, with some of the, you know, with the good jam session, I was hooked even more, because when you play bass, you're kind of outside the circle, you know, everybody else is sitting down. And once I started playing in sessions, you know, down in the group, I was like, oh, I'm not going back up there.
Hinton, West Virginia was, or still yet was, is a railroad town, and they, I grew up, my dad had a business in that town, and I grew up very near a little place called Bell Point, where the Greenbrier and the New River come together and become the New River from that point on. And I live now at what we call Talcott, West Virginia, which is known for the old John Henry Tunnel. The tunnel that he worked in is yet there. In fact, they've made a nice little public park out of that whole area there. And the tunnel, you can actually still, the original tunnel's there, and then in 1930 they paralleled one to it. So, but I live, yeah, very close to, about 2 miles from where the old John Henry Tunnel is. When I was about 14 actually, I started playing harmonica, and there was an old gentleman in my community that played banjo. He was 86 years old, and he had learned from an ex-slave who played an old two-finger style banjo player. I hadn't heard well, he didn't play what we call the claw hammer or the drop thumb. And so I really liked to hear him. I liked bluegrass at the time, but I really was caught up. I really enjoyed the old time music and the way the old man played. So I basically went to him, and he gave me his old banjo. He had quit playing. I'd heard him earlier, about 5 years as a kid. The time I got interested, he said he couldn't play anymore. Yeah, but he still showed me some like fundamental techniques of the old two-finger style. And his banjo was all derelict. He said, you can get it fixed up, which I did myself. He said, bring it back, and I can probably still tune, and I'll show you what I know. So that's how I got started. Then I started listening to older recordings, you know. And back in about 66, a fellow moved back into the Hinton area who was a good clawhammer player, and he and his sons were about my age, and they had been playing about a year. They had left the Hinton area and went to Arizona. When they came back, both of the boys had been playing for about a year, guitar and banjo, and their dad showed me the fundamentals, you know, of how to play the drop thumb style.
Did you know the difference between old time and bluegrass back then, or was it how big a divide was it back then?
Well, you would hear more bluegrass, you know, on television and radio. You know, Flat and Scruggs, you know, the Martha White program was on, and talking about, you know, the 60s or mid 60s and a little earlier. And of course, if you turned into the Grand Ole Opry, String Bean was still on the Opry. You'd hear him play, and it was obvious, you know, it was a different technique, and the repertoire of songs were typically different. And but then I started running into old players. Old man up in Greenbrier County, Lee Blankenship, was a real good drop thumb player and didn't sing, just played the old melodies, you know. And I was playing guitar by about 67 or 8. I started learning, to play guitar. And the fiddle, I took it up in about 73. I was playing banjo and guitar to an old-time fiddler. He didn't play many tunes, but he played them as well as you ever heard the traditional tunes. He liked to play a lot of hymns, but if he played, Stony Point or Mississippi Sawyer, Arkansas Traveler, he was one of the best melodic, clear, clean, melodic fiddlers. Really good. He didn't have a large repertoire, but what he had, he knew how to play it. He was good.
Let's get my imagination going. How did you approach these old timers and talk them into showing you something?
Well, my grandfather, I'll tell you, I was interested in things other than the music of the past, and one of those things was old time long rifle shooting muzzle loaders, and all the knowledge of all that, and the accoutrements that went with it. And I liked blacksmithing, and I liked old time woodworking. So I was seeking out these old timers that had those old skills, and I literally created a museum that showcases all those things, all the material culture from those type of things. And so as a young kid, and I would run into good musicians, and of course that was a very ongoing interest of mine too. But I just had a lot of interest in multiple directions, but it tended to be all something from the past, the music and the material culture. And I did a lot of restoration work, worked on old guns, and I would go in people's home and refinish woodwork. I refinished furniture. I rebuilt about 6 of the old pump organs, the old time organs that people had, in their homes and churches. Clocks. I made a living doing all those type of things, and again, they were all. It was all connected to the past. They were old skills and trades of the past, and I learned them, or was mentored under someone, that knew those things. And I still practice multiple things of that nature.
But some of them old guys can be pretty cantankerous, or what, some stranger. Yeah. So how would you get past that?
I was a kid too. Well, they were pretty gregarious. About all the people that I knew were pretty gregarious. My grandparents were that way. My grandfathers and even grandmothers were. So I really didn't run into any grumpy or hard-headed people. And being younger, I think it interested them, that someone of a much younger generation was interested in what they had done or what they were still doing, because most people weren't. When I was growing up, everybody was listening to the Beatles. If you didn't listen to country and western or the bluegrass, most of the young folks had gone totally, to rock and roll. At that point, it was the Beatles.
Well, my family played on both sides. Both my grandfathers were medicine show performers in their 20s. I had a great uncle who played with Bill Monroe, and it was just always there. I don't know that I had a choice.
How did they handle you learning something? Was like pick something up, or just?
There wasn't a teacher in my family, not at all. And my grandfather used to get really loud, and what it was is that he wasn't mad at me, but he couldn't convey his thoughts. He couldn't tell me how to do it, so he would get aggravated. And I learned real quick not to ask him. So my grandparents had an old guitar that I was forbidden to touch. And when they would turn their back, I would sneak in and kind of pluck on it a little bit. When they finally caught me, it was to the point where I could kind of do something, and nothing was ever said about it. I braced myself for the storm, but it never happened. And I had a great uncle that was a really, really great guitar player. And I used to just sit and watch him and listen. And it's funny because some of my very first memories, I remember being in church and my aunt clapping my hands together while he was playing up in the pulpit, and I can still shut my eyes and hear that sound. It just was such an inspiring thing to me. It's the only thing I'd sit still for. The first person I ever played on stage with was Jeanette Carter, of the Carter family, and she came to the school that I was going to do a school performance, and a good buddy of mine, who's funny because he's now a pretty famous author.
What's his name?
Franklin Horton. his name. He dared me to go backstage and talk to him. So I was scared to death, and I didn't know who they were. Went backstage and talked to them, and they invited me out on stage with them. I played on stage with them, and it's funny because I went home and told my grandfather. I said, "Yeah, some people came to the school and played today, and they let me play with them." He said, "Well, that's great." I said, "Who were they?" I said, "Well, Jeanette Carter." He said, "Boy, you playing with the Carter family?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Wow."
Well, how'd that make you feel?
Oh, scared.
You didn't know it?
I didn't know it. I had no idea. It was just people coming to play. I didn't
wow.
Well, see, I grew up playing in jam sessions that, the family, they would do an old-time fiddle piece, and then do a Monroe piece, and then do a gospel piece, and then turn around and do something like Green, Green Grass at Home or something like that. So it was just music. And then I heard a quote from, I think it was Duke Ellington, said there's two kinds of music, good and bad. And I agree with that. I love bluegrass. Really well done. Yeah, I like it. I like rock. My father was a rocker, and I've told this quite a bit. He was arrested in 1958 for dancing at a Jerry Lee Lewis concert. And they told him either, go to jail or go in the army, so he ended up in the army. I knew a lot of the songs because I played them with all these older fellas. So that, you play music with somebody 80, 90 years old, it was a lot slower and a lot lower energy. So when I heard the first time I heard a young, hot fiddle band, it was like, wow, now that's it. That's the sound. So I ended up going back in that way.
I think we're all born with sort of personalities that are just, it can range from wanting to please your parents to wanting to be like sort of, resist your parents. And I could tell when my dad asked me if I wanted fiddle lessons that, that I wanted to please him, because I'd always seen the fiddle as being what my grandpa, the old timer, he was celebrated as a old time fiddle player, and more than that, he was a quality fiddle player.
And what was his name?
Ralph McGee,
yeah,
his namesake. But he was a quality fiddle player, but also a quality entertainer. And it didn't matter what age you were or where you were from, he could find a way to keep you entertained for his little set of fiddle tunes he did. He was a trick fiddler, played, like listen to the Mockingbird, play with a toothpick, play with a dried coon bone. And yeah. But so being 4 or 5 years old and being asked if I wanted to learn to play the fiddle, I thought, oh yeah, that means I could be like the old timer. But old timer was not much of a teacher. That's what he was known as, the old timer. So he wasn't much of a teacher. So my dad drove us in from Stokes County, about 20 miles south down into Winston-Salem, where I got lessons from an old German man on the violin, Edward Siebel. He was a luthier and a fiddle instructor, violin instructor. So they all wanted me to learn how to read notes and learn to play violin. Well, I figured out somewhere early on in the days this was different than what the old timer was doing. I mean, I kind of persisted through it, but it wasn't long until I was sort of resisting you need to go practice 30 minutes. So I was like probably 6 or 7 years old and having to go into the bathroom, and the door shut behind me, and play the fiddle. And I had a natural ear, so I learned in spite of a bad attitude a little bit, but I wasn't a real prodigy. I mean, I wasn't like this amazing kid. My dad played the piano at home, so once I got to where I could sort of play fast enough to keep up and everything, there was a family band with my grandpa and his brother and my dad and a few other local musicians that played at a restaurant every week in Tobaccoville, North Carolina, called the Polyrosa Restaurant. So both me and Ralph, we got our debuts and our initiation into public performance down at the Polyrosa on Saturday nights.
They would dress me up as an engineer, and I sang the old 97 and Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you get into music? How'd you start and why?
I kind of avoided it probably till I was about 13 or so, and our sisters started taking us to see some pretty heavy-hitting acts, and then all of a sudden I decided I wanted to play. We got to see Newgrass Revival and Tony Rice and things like that, Hot Rise, and then all of a sudden I kind of got bit and wanted to learn how to do that stuff.
What'd you start out with?
Well, I actually started out with fiddle lessons too, but I didn't make it very far. And then I got some guitar lessons when I think I was about 12 or 13, somewhere in there. And still didn't really grab me until we seen the Newgrass Revival play. And then I thought, I like this kind of stuff. So then I wanted I wanted to go sing like John Calvin, but I realized you can't do that, so I decided I'd just play mandolin.
So he would just have his hairdo instead, you know. Hey, John.
Did you fall into the, I want to play like Tony Rice trap or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then it wasn't, you know, learn how to play a little stuff, or you know, a few things, and then I was lucky enough to fall into the clique with the Rice family, and got to be in the inner circle for several years. So I got to learn some close-up stuff from them. So
from Tony?
Yeah, from
Wyatt was around a lot. He would.
Really?
Yeah.
And then my dad owned when we were teenagers, he owned a little place there in Pilot Mountain, and he had some top name acts come through there. So we got some personal time with the big shots about every few weeks. And
it was in 1985 that Newgrass Revival played there in September and in December. So they came back to back and they filled the place up. They came and they had dinner with our family, and so I got to meet Bela at an early age. I was 14 or 15 years old, and you know, you didn't realize, but you're making relationships and friends and musical heroes. You know, those were our rock star heroes at that point in time. And
it was them and Muhammad Ali, and Evel Knievel,
and Ric Flair.
Yeah, Ric Flair,
Dusty Rhodes.
All those guys was on the same.
Did you give him a big whoop?
Woo!
First jam session I started going to, you know, if I was 14, the 16-year-old there was a guy named Clay Jones, and so he was already quite an amazing guitar player by that time, and he had a driver's license. So when it came to going to fiddlers conventions and bluegrass festivals, it was like, Dad, can I ride with Clay to West Virginia to,
sure,
you know,
that's a great
go ahead,
idea.
you know. So me and Clay Jones and Greg Luck sailing up the road, you know, to what was the first cliff top, actually. 1985 or so, somewhere 86, whatever it was, one of the very early ones. And you know, those guys went on and persisted with that kind of a career and did well, you know. And
how do you
I
feel
didn't realize
about
what I was doing at the time, that I was kind of learning from some really talented people, you know.
How do you feel about, I mean, I know you play old time, but the old time bluegrass divide was pretty divided back then, wasn't it?
My grandpa was an old time fiddle player, but
he was old time, but it wasn't.
He would
there
play
was a lot of
pop.
ragtime stuff because his brother that also played that band was he was a tenor banjo player, so they did a lot of ragtime stuff, and then I don't know, they just had a weird little twist on it. It wasn't like
he was listening to the radio. They were listening. They had by the 20s and 30s, you know, the radio was in the area, so they were listening and learning whatever was on that radio. He was born in 1901. Ralph McGee was old timer, and so yeah. So there's little things about his repertoire there. Vaudeville.
Yeah.
He went and played in the speakeasies during Prohibition up in Toledo, Ohio. He'd go across the river into Detroit, and he had some great stories about, you know, that he would talk about being a fiddle player. That's how I said, so when did people start calling you the old timer? He said, well, I reckon I was about 38, 39 years old.
Well, how did music come into your life? Man, you have a family that played it, or you found it?
Yeah, my father played it.
Tell me about.
He played the guitar, and he and I would sing in church and pick around the home. He got me started on the guitar, and I wanted to learn to play banjo.
Where'd that come from?
Just wanting to learn. I had an uncle that played clawhammer, a great uncle, I'm sorry. I had a great uncle that played clawhammer style, Josh Thomas, played clawhammer style. And I was young when he passed away, so I just had the urge to want to play the banjo. And I learned to play the banjo on my own, to be honest with you. It was different being a black banjo player, starting to learn to play. Getting people to show you how to play. Nobody would take you serious, you know. Nobody thought a black man would play a banjo. So, I just hung around, learned, listened, and picked it up on my own. Love of music kept me in it, you know, bluegrass, I've always loved it. The banjo originated from African descent with the gourd banjos, worked its way up. So
Well, how did black family and black friends think about you playing the banjo?
Family was okay. Your close friends are. Right? That's where you distinguish friends from people that say you're friends. You know, I had no problem with it at all. They've always wanted to back me in whatever I done. So I didn't have a problem there. My problem was getting the public, other bluegrass people to accept it, and it went over pretty good. Still have problems to this day. I have to be honest with you. There's still problems to this day, but it's all right. It's all right. I love it. We have a real good bluegrass group. We got a group called Rock Creek Bluegrass. That's we are real big in harmony. We love to harmonize, and so we're still playing traditional bluegrass. What we play, and the guys I played with really helped me a lot on the harmonizing, because when I first started singing, I sang by myself. And I just do all the lead, the tenor, and all together myself. And coming back down and holding your part, I had to learn. And I had two good guys, Dave Johnson and Bob Hensley, that's helping me out real good with it. So that makes it even better. It makes you feel good. I'm telling you now, you get a good feeling about it when it's right. When it's right. And we definitely search for that. We reach for it. We work hard at it. And we got lucky. One of our heroes that believes in harmonizing is Doyle Lawson, and we got lucky enough to open up for Doyle at the Bluegrass Underground this past about 3 years ago. Yes. Wow. So that was a thrill. That was a thrill to sit and listen to what put us to where we are. You know what I'm saying? He's the foundation of it. And, so we definitely believe in the harmonizing.
That was so good it falls out of my mouth. Okay, that was good.
Here's what. It's all four James.
Well, I was probably about 4 years old, and my great-grandparents and grandparents more or less raised me. And they had a big stack of records there, and 8 tracks, and an old stereo. And so I grew up listening to the Carter family, and early bluegrass music, and early gospel music. And then sometime at that point, there used to be a traveling salesman that would come around. He sold pianos, and my grandpa decided to buy one of them pianos. And anyway, so that's what I started out on, and somebody gave me a little book that had the chords and all in it. But ever since I was really little, I had, every time I would go somewhere and see a banjo, I didn't even know what one was, but I just loved the sound of it, and I loved the way it looked. I just liked everything about it. And so when I was about maybe 9 or 10 years old, and that's been many years ago, somebody in my family finally got me one, and a neighbor taught me a few chords on it, and I got started. And I guess I've been playing somewhere close to 30 years, and have been blessed enough to make it my living through the years, mainly, and just continue to enjoy it. It's always a learning experience, and getting to meet new people and have fun. And well, really, the banjo came to me probably faster, easier than anything did. The piano took me a few years to get to where I could do anything with it, and but the banjo, I wanted to learn Foggy Mountain Breakdown. That's the song that Earl Scruggs played, and I learned that one first, and it took me maybe a year and a half, and a little group of musicians right there around the house said, well, we'd like for you to come play banjo with us. So really it was less than 2 years from the time I started playing the banjo till the time that I was in my first band. So it wasn't very long at that. I think I just had such an interest in it. It was one of those things, it wasn't like a hobby, something that you know, you do for fun every now and then. The banjo to me was just something that I lived and breathed. I would wake up It was an obsession. So, you know, I'd wake up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would play that banjo for an hour and a half before I went to school. And then as soon as I got home from school, I would play it most of the night. And so you can imagine my schoolwork kind of went downhill. But it really was. I was just obsessed with the banjo. That was all I was interested in learning and knowing anything about.
What would your grandparents think about 5:30 in the morning banjo playing?
Well, they got tired of it sometimes, but you know, being raised with an older generation, to them that was more a part of life than it is people, I think, now. They were more used to hearing that instrument from the time that they were little children themselves. When I first started playing, I played a two-finger style with my thumb and index finger, and trying to get my middle finger to make that three-finger roll was really hard. And then the other thing, maybe 10 years ago, Jim Lloyd, who you'll see in this production here, showed me some clawhammer banjo. And it took me probably 6 months of doing that all day, every day, to get that lick down. So that was probably the two biggest hurdles with the banjo, was just the basic first movements. And then after that, it just sort of flows. It's like learning typing. You know, once you learn to type, you don't have to think about it anymore. It just happens, and you can get faster and faster with it.
I was really little. I've been singing as long as I can remember. And my granddaddy, back home in Waynesboro, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, he was a preacher, pastor. He pastored the same little church in Waynesboro for 57 years. And he played the guitar. He loved bluegrass and old time. He loved the Carter family and all. So I had that influence. And then my great-grandfather on my mother's side, he was an incredible fingerstyle guitar player. He sort of incorporated a little bit of the Doc Watson style in with the Maybelle Carter scratch style. He had his own unique thing going on, and the most beautiful voice. He was the best singer in the Shenandoah Valley, hands down. He had a beautiful tone. And so I had those two influences. And I grew up listening to, I didn't know there was any difference. I grew up listening to the radio, what was popular back then in the 90s. I was born in '87. So what was on the radio, the Judds, Dolly Parton, and all that. But I didn't, to me, in my mind as a little child, there was no difference between that and bluegrass and old time and folk and gospel. It was all just music. So at the same time I was listening to whatever was popular on the radio at the time, I was also listening to the Carter family and Jim and Jesse and all of these incredible Virginia artists, as a matter of fact. But anyway, I was 12 years old when I really started trying to play an instrument, and my granddaddy, Barry, he showed me my first 3 chords on the guitar, and he said, now here's your 3 chords, and then he gave me this song called Cowboy Jack, which is an old Carter family song, and he sang it for me, and he said, now you learn the chords, and when you come back next week for your second lesson, I'll show you how those chords fit this song and where to put them. But just like Tony, I was so obsessed and so enamored and so in love with music and the guitar and singing that I sat down and figured out those chords and where they went on my own. And when I came back for the second lesson, I sang the song for him, and that's when they knew that really, you know, like even though I had always been singing, they knew that I really had a gift and a talent for music. It really helps to start young and you can learn, because now I try to learn stuff and it's a struggle. But it's just like Tony said, I was kind of like a duck to water. I just took right to it. I don't remember ever really struggling to do those things, but it's been a long time ago too. But I was just so in love with it. It really wasn't like practice or it wasn't work. It was just something that I just loved and enjoyed so much. There's so many bluegrass songs and gospel songs and all of these songs that nobody has any idea that the Carter family is the one who made him famous.
I'll say it's something to remember too that, you know, listening to some of the styles of music now and the way the instruments work together, arrangements and whatnot, and we can look at the Carter family's music and it seems so simple compared to what we have now. But you got to think about at that time, you know, they were some of the very first people doing that.
They were the first people to make a record. They didn't learn from albums. They taught themselves. So it's really incredible. And Maybelle Carter was my hero when I was a kid. And talking about learning the guitar, I had a couple videos of her and Sarah from later in Maybelle's life. It was her and Sarah singing together. And I would rewind, this was on VHS, you know, so I would rewind and really study what she did on the guitar. And the same thing with the auto harp. That's how I learned from the records and the videos that I had of her playing, and she's my hero. I love her so much. She is like my biggest inspiration and influence.
I would say Maybelle Carter is probably the very first famous country guitar player.
Yeah. She paved the way.
And pretty much everything after that, all the way from Chet Atkins to Jimmy Capps, you know, they all learned from her.
Without her, there wouldn't have been a Chet Atkins and all them. Without her.
So I had played guitar with a flat pick some, and I had learned a few of the tunes that Earl Scruggs played on the guitar with some finger picks. And I'd heard Maybelle play, and I never could quite figure out what she's doing.
Little jingle she's got going on.
It's one of those things that's so simple that it's hard, unless somebody shows it to you. And I really think Heather actually plays it, and John Carter Cash, her grandson, agrees too that she
That's
actually,
Maybelle's grandson, not mine.
Yeah, Maybelle's grandson actually plays closer to Maybelle than anybody else does. But she taught me that, and it's still something that I don't think is easy. It doesn't come as naturally to me as some other things do. She was not a big woman. She was a small, short, tiny little woman, and you know, she always generally played a Gibson L5, which is a big guitar. It's not little at all.
Her tone that she pulled the most beautiful big tone. She was something.
We actually went to Earl Scruggs' house.
Sure did.
Maybe a couple years before he died.
Yep.
And
right after Louise had died.
Yeah.
His wife. And
he said, you know, there's never been anybody, and he really liked Heather's guitar playing like that. Earl was a big fan of Maybelle too. That was his hero. But he said there's never been anybody that played the guitar that got that specific tone that Maybelle did. It was just such a pretty sound.
Did you play at Earl's house?
We sure did.
Yeah.
Well, how'd that go?
Oh, it was incredible.
It was awesome.
He's like this. He was the sweetest man ever.
He played with you?
Yeah.
Oh.
He sure did.
He didn't play banjo that night, but he played the guitar.
We played a lot of Carter family
No
music.
kidding.
We were working for Tom T and Dixie Hall at the time.
Yes.
Dixie had that label, Blue Circle Records, out of their home is where the recording studio was in Franklin, Tennessee. And we were down there recording, and Miss Dixie had said there's a gentleman who knew Maybelle really well, and he's really going through a hard time because his wife passed away, and it would really cheer him up if you kids would go, because we were really young then. He said, you know, she said if you kids would go and maybe play him a couple of songs, but she didn't tell us who it was. So a lady who worked for Miss Dixie carried us down there, drove us down there. We pulled up to the gate, and we had to buzz in or whatever, and we heard this little feeble voice come over the intercom, and me and Tony just looked at each other and said, I know that voice. I just can't place who it is. And it was nighttime whenever we pulled up to his home. And he came out on the porch and said the lights were behind him and all you could see was his silhouette. And I just put my head in my hands and I said, Tony, that is Earl Scruggs. He said, there is no way. But sure enough, it was. And we stayed for hours with him. He was just so kind and inviting, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. He didn't want us to leave.
He said, y'all just come on and stay the night if you want to.
Yeah, and the guitar that we had with us that night, the old archtop we had with us, we saved the strings that he played on. We changed the strings, we saved them.
The founder of the jam program, Helen White, you know, she started it not really as a way of preserving the traditions, but more as an avenue to give kids something positive to do after school and to connect them to their community, and not so much about, preserving the music, which has, for the most part, right here in the corner of western North Carolina and southwest Virginia, fared pretty well culturally. 20 years later, it's become more of a household name in our mountain counties, and it is a cool thing for a lot of kids to do. It gives them more of a purpose and helps them develop their identity.
You've been at this a while, so you see kids come out of the program, they're on to bigger and better things. So how does that make you feel?
Good. We're definitely super proud of those stellar musicians that are, making it on their own and crediting Jam for their reason for getting into Appalachian music. But the goal of the program model was never to create the next superstar. It was just more connecting kids to the culture and to each other, helping them get involved in music, which is a lifelong skill and love, as opposed to a lot of other activities kids get involved in. Because we've already seen in the 20 years that Jam has been around, there are already kids who are in some of the first years of the program who have kids of their own, already enrolling them into the program because it's something they did, it's something they had fond memories of. I think Helen's legacy with the Jam program is immeasurable, and I'm not sure that she knew how big of an impact she was going to make when she got that first idea for an after-school program. Sparta, North Carolina, and really how far it has already spread and where it will go, as generations continue. The impact it has had on the music and just Appalachian culture.
The Jam program, I just feel like it's just this feeding, this just wonderful, what's the word I'm looking for, pipeline of musicians. Just, already some of the graduates are top-notch, musicians playing in some of the best bands in Virginia and North Carolina and Tennessee. But I feel like I've just seen it in Virginia, the effects of it more, at least. I feel like, and this is just totally my opinion, I don't know if it's true at all, but, I've lived in Georgia for the last 20 years, and so I've been a little bit disconnected from the music scene, except for just to go to fiddlers conventions and play with all my friends that were mostly from North Carolina and Virginia. But when we started coming to Virginia more often, my husband and I, we started noticing that the quality of the musicians and the quantity of them was just so high. We were just like, wow, it just feels like Virginia is just exploding with especially with people who are multi-generational musicians, and not as many transplants. And so we wanted to be in the middle of that. We were like, well, we're going to be low man on the totem pole, but that's okay, and the first couple of sessions we played in, we were like, oh wow, we're going to get so much better playing in Virginia, because everybody plays just really, really fast and very driving, and we love that. We play a lot with Janice Birchfield now because my husband plays. He loves Joe Birchfield's style, so he knows a lot of their reps, so we do a lot of shows with Janice.
I think it's very important, and again, I'm not over in the area where Jim and where they're doing all that over in that part of Virginia, but I think it's very important, and there's some great music. There are some great young musicians starting to show up within that program. I've heard some of them, 14, 15-year-old, good banjo, and again, in both genres of music. You're hearing excellent old-time young folks and really good ones in the bluegrass. And the gals, I really enjoy hearing some of those girls that are starting to sing and play a really nice melodic mandolin or picking the guitar or playing rhythm or between, doing both styles on guitar, accompanying themselves with just rhythm or whatever. But boy, I think it's really a good thing. And it's a discipline. It's a discipline to be able to play music and to really play well.
I think it's incredibly important. Brett hired me about 3 years ago, and the program has grown and grown by leaps and bounds. Even with this shutdown, we've continued to grow. And we're knocking on about 3,000 kids a year.
Wow.
And not all of them will continue to play. There's no doubt about that. But I think our success rate is above 50%. And the kids, it's so much easier than it was when I was trying to learn, because we do have good teachers and that sort of thing. And the kids, they're producing just geniuses of players, just incredible. And it's funny because I've been teaching a long time too. Before I was with Jim, I was teaching. And you know, you'll teach or go somewhere and some kid come up to you and say, "Hey, can I play one with you?" And you say, "Sure." And then 5 years later, here's Liam Purcell, who's now going to one of the famous music schools. You know, he's shot past me. But they'll remember you. You know, and Will Keys told me one time too. He says, You got to be nice to these young kids, so when they step on you, they'll remember you. You know, to me, it's watching the kids' faces when they get it. When you're trying to show them something, and I'm one of these guys. Usually, anything else, I have no patience for. I'm one of these. If I'm working on a car, I'll throw wrenches and stuff like that. But I can sit with a beginner fiddle player all day, and when that light comes on, when they see that, it's just an incredible feeling to watch them do that. And at all levels, you know, whether you're a beginner or advanced player, if you're trying to show an advanced player something that's kind of difficult, when that light comes on, it's obvious. You can watch them just glow.
They get a riff, or they get a roll, or
yeah, riff, roll, a section of a song that's hard, anything like that, and that to me is more rewarding than even seeing them on stage or something. I just the satisfaction look on their face that they have achieved something. You know, that's when it's fun for me.
Being a good teacher for a child is different than being a good one for an adult. You got to do something to generate some excitement. You know, and it's too easy. Since I taught all ages when I was teaching, sometimes you'd slip into talking to a 8 or 9 year old like they were, 30-year-olds. So you had to remember who you're teaching, and keep it a little light and silly sometimes. Or if it's a real, serious young kid, you gotta match who's in front of you. You gotta figure out what gets them going. Really, with all ages, but that's children are. I've got, Ralph does very well with young people, and we've got some other friends that I know are excellent with keeping that excitement up for young people.
One day, all of us doing this show will be putting them in the case for the last time, so somebody's got to, and I try to pass along every little lick, note, funny story somebody's told me, and we've been really lucky to get thrown in with some big dogs along the way. So we've heard all the stories. We've heard lots of the cool licks and obscure tunes. So we've been extremely lucky through this.
Jim asked me to come to IBMA last year, year before last, and perform on the jam stage for the kids, and I loved it. And I'm amazed at the job that they're doing. They're doing a fantastic job, and how many kids they have. Man, I tell you, the future can't die if those kids hang in there. And the thing I like about bluegrass, you have to be great. Just be good and enjoy what you're doing. If your heart's in it, people gonna listen to you. They don't care. You don't have to be super duper good to play bluegrass. And the longer you play, the better you get. And that's the difference in bluegrass. I sang in a rock band for a while, and you get a lot more criticized there than you do in bluegrass. Bluegrass is a form of love, I think, for the bluegrass music. And I wouldn't play anything else, I'll be honest with you. Well, I've had people ask me to teach them, and I tell them I'd rather they learn by the book. And I think they'd be a lot happier because, but I had to do what I had to do. And I don't regret it, I just love it. It's just all there is to it. So.
Well, how did you learn? Through records, or?
Yeah, a bunch.
Slow them down, or?
Bunch through records. And I traveled a lot. I traveled like watch banjo players. And I was telling my buddy out there a few minutes ago, you learn something, and it's just a small, may not be 3 measures, and you go home and it'll take you 3 weeks to learn that. Then you go back and you learn something else. And it's a lot easier if you do it by the book, the Earl style, because they show you where you're going. When you're doing it on your own, you got to find out where you're going. Then you got to remember where you're going. Then you got it down. So it's a lot easier to learn it by the book, I think, and like it. But you know, I've always said, if everybody played like Earl, we'd have a million Earls. You know, you take his style and then add yours to it. You take his lessons and add yours to it. That's what I like to do. So, and then you got your different styles of music. It changed when you could play with somebody, you know. And to all the people that's learning, find somebody that you can play with that don't mind you making mistakes, that'll help you, and you'll get there a lot faster. And that's kind of easier said than done, to be honest with you. You know, you got to have a very patient person that will let you learn while they're playing. And that helps more than anything. But as soon as you can get to where you can follow one song, go to the jams, and then you learn to follow other songs. It'll be a slow process, but if you're young enough, just stay back far where people can hear you, and you won't make nobody mad that way. See? But man, jam sessions is what it's all about to me. I don't care who you are. If you want to play, come up and play with us. We don't care. We don't care at all. So, you know, nobody was born playing this. Yeah, everybody had learned. So why you want to be hard on somebody else learning? You shouldn't do that. You know, you got to help each other. So that's the way I look at it. I'll help anybody that can. So that's it.
Well, I think this is incredible. I think this is wonderful. I wish there was something like this around when I was coming up. How much easier it would have been to learn, and to learn how to jam. Because, you know, sitting at home and learning by video or learning by record or CD or, you know, off the internet, YouTube, whatever. That's great and that's wonderful. We need to practice at home. But being in a situation where you can learn how to jam and play with other musicians and learn how the dynamic works and how to play tastefully and stay out of each other's way, and so that you sound like a whole unit. That's what comes with being together. And
I think it's
I wish
great
I had something
too,
like that when I was coming up.
being able to introduce some of these older styles of music too, that if somebody don't continue it on, nobody's going to know about it. It'll be lost. It'll be a part of history that nobody will know about.
That's right.
And as you get older, like myself, the older you get, the more history seems to be more important.
Yeah.
You maybe don't see it when you're younger, but as you get older,
You will.
you will.
Mm-hmm.